There she goes.
Good morning and welcome to the September 18th Victim Compensation Board meeting. For those of you in the room that are appearing on a specific agenda item or wish to offer public comment, the microphones at the podium and tables are directional and require that you hold them fairly close to your mouth when speaking to ensure your testimony is captured by our audio equipment. For members and participants who are appearing via Zoom, if you cannot hear the presenter, please use the comment feature to note that, as staff are monitoring the comments in real time. Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton.
Present.
Member Johnson.
Here.
Chair Ravel.
Present.
Good morning. Item 1 is the approval of the minutes for the July 17, 2025 board meeting.
Is there any discussion, additions, or corrections to the minutes from the board?
No.
Do I have a motion to approve item 1?
I move to approve item 1.
I second.
Is there any public comment on this item?
Seeing none, council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is approval of the July 17th, 2025 meeting minutes. Member Becton.
Aye.
Member Johnson.
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The next item is public comment. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda. As any items discussed during public comment have not been agendized, the board is not permitted to take any action on these matters at this meeting. For those participating via telephone, if you wish to offer public comment during this meeting, you can raise your hand by pressing *9 on your telephone. For those participating via Zoom, please raise your hand if you wish to offer comment, and we will acknowledge you and let you know when it is your turn to speak.
Thank you. I see Ms. Petros has her hand up. Ms. Petros. Thanks for your patience. We're experimenting with a new setup. So it's.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can hear you. Thank you, Ms. Petros.
Okay. I'm sorry, but good morning, board members and staff. My name is Margaret Petros. I'm a longtime victim of crime advocate and the executive director at the Bay Area nonprofit Mothers Against Murder. Before I begin, I want to pause and express sincere sympathy for the family, friends, and supporters of Charlie Kirk, who was violently murdered recently. Regardless of political differences, no one in this country should lose their life for expressing their opinion. Violence of this kind is unacceptable, and my thoughts as an individual, as well as a professional victim advocate, are with his wife, with his 2 young children, and all in this nation who are grieving for this loss. Now, turning to the matter before this board is item number 3. Since you don't allow comments, public comments on executive officer's report, I'd like to share my thoughts here. And reading the California Victim Compensation Board's annual report is upsetting to me. Seeing that the legislature appropriated $172.6 million for this agency to serve crime victims in 24-25, yet only $44 million annual actually made its way to victims. That leaves over $127 million unaccounted for in terms of direct victim assistance. My question is, where did it go to? Not to families burying their children, not to survivors of rape, domestic violence, child abuse cases, and certainly not to the thousands of victims who applied and were denied. The truth is, this report is not transparent. It does not tell us clearly an accounting of how much went to salaries, executive staff, IT contract, consultants, so we can determine what's happening with those funds. Lack of transparency is an insult to every single victim who was denied help this year. Out of 35,480 claims processed, more than 10,000 were denied. So that's nearly 29%. 1 in 3 victims was told no. That's thousands of shattered lives, and twice, first by the violent crime and then by this agency. When an agency holds $172 million in its hands and less than a third of that ever reaches the people it is meant for, that's really bad management. So before you today is agenda item number 3. I urge board members to ask the executive staff to release details to the public, explain why less than 45 million went to victims, and address why nearly 29% of claims was denied. Victims, advocates, the public deserve transparency. Thank you for your efforts, and thank you for allowing me the public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Petros. And I know we all agree that political violence is totally unacceptable and horrifying. So thank you for your input as well. I see Ms. Malone has her hand up. Ms. Malone?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. I'm the new Senior Director of the National Alliance of Trauma Recovery Centers, and I'm sure, as you guys are aware, colleagues of mine, my team, came and presented last board meeting and offered some recommendations around grant making to trauma recovery centers. And we were under the impression that that would be kind of taken back and worked on, and that we would hear some updates about, you know, what was considered and what happened. So when we saw the agenda come out and didn't see it as an agenda item, I just wanted to kind of urge the board to maybe take this up in a more public way next time. And I guess my question to you would be, what steps has the board taken to consider what was recommended in that last meeting? And for Cal VCB, obviously, kind of what do you anticipate changing, if anything, to that process to make it a little bit more efficient and predictable and sustainable? So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Ms. Malone. I know that we'll be talking more about TRCs in the coming months. So thank you for your comments and also for your input at the last meeting. Ms. Taylor has her hand up. Ms. Taylor?
Good morning. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Taylor.
Okay. Good morning to you all. I apologize. I'm a little confused about the appropriate place for me to comment. I did want to comment and provide some feedback on the annual report. Is this the time for that?
Yes, please. This is for all items not on the agenda. That is on the agenda, but typically, as Ms. Petros noted, we do not take public comment after the executive director's report. So please.
Okay, thank you. So in reading through that report, there are some additional barriers beyond what has been identified on that annual report. In this, excuse me, in this section heading promote access and equity to Cal VCB services, I had to break this heading down to understand what it means to me and imagine, excuse me, what it could mean to others. The definition of the word equity means to be fair and impartial. In my mind, that means if equitable services are to be provided, everyone should have access to the same level and quality of services. On page 7, under the Advocate Portal enhancements, there is a bullet for real-time updates. Without having any experience using this specific portal, I imagine that having the ability to see application updates in real time is a valuable enhancement for victims, their advocates, as well as Cal VCB staff who assist callers from the customer service line. through the initiation of my own application since 2022, I have personally called customer service more than a dozen times, inquiring about updates to my application. Unfortunately, the updates that I have received have not been in real time. Specifically, all updates following my hearing have been unchanged. I would like to see this same type of portal enhancement, which is currently available to advocates, made available for individuals like me who do not have an advocate. Also on page 7, under updated appeals process with the bullet new guidance, my question there is, what information can you provide on this? Moving on to page 9, shows application data, which includes applications received by race and ethnicity. What additional data is analyzed but is not listed here? As someone with an interest in public health, I recognize disparities exist. I am most curious about statistics on the allowed versus denied applications by racial and ethnic groups. In putting together this report, what disparities were identified and how are these disparities being addressed? Also, on the same page, the note on the bottom mentions the use of outside agencies for investigations. My question here, what information can be shared about this referral process? On page 13, the first paragraph discusses government agencies that have access to the advocate portal. I wanted to know whether sheriff's offices and police departments are examples of those government partners. And if so, why would they need to have access to the portal? And on page 17, just some feedback. When you click on the link for the appeals webpage, the public is presented with before, during, and after hearing info. The webpage states that the hearing is informal, while stating the hearing will be conducted by a hearing officer. My sense as an applicant who has gone through this hearing process was that the hearing was not informal. The hearing was recorded. The hearing officer was present, an attorney was present, and a trainee was also present. I believe the webpage information needs to be updated so that applicants have a better sense of what to expect. Finally, on the section of use of language, since legal has made some updates, I would like to request that Cal VCB consider sending out new letters with these updates to anyone with a pending application who was sent a letter prior to these updates. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor, for your comments and sharing your perspective. A lot of your comments are very well taken, so we appreciate hearing from you. Mr. Tenoyan.
Hello there. Good morning, everyone. This is Hovhannes Tenoyan. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address the board. I'm from Burbank, California, and I'm also a UC Berkeley graduate. I have a couple comments on previous business of the board, the upcoming agenda item for the annual report, as well as some general comments. As far as previous business goes, I want to point out to everybody the Joint Legislative Audit Committee recently. There was an April 23 letter sent to State Assembly Member Harapetian by State Senator Ashby requesting an audit of Cal VCB. the compensation system, and the restitution system. On June 18, the committee went over the requests for the audit and they voted yes to proceed. I'm pretty sure maybe some board members are familiar with that. And also July 17th, Cal VCB itself on their public meeting, they discussed their position in relation to that audit request. So I want to bring this up because it's really important. We rarely get audits by the legislature of the agency. Usually they're pretty historical. So I definitely want to point this out to everyone who's on this call. Please reach out to Senator Ashby. Please reach out to Assemblymember Hara Bedyan and the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, and feel free to let them know your thoughts. A lot of the different topics that they're going to be looking into is the eligibility, how approvals and denials are being done, any kind of demographics, but it's also pretty related to the restitution system. So there are going to be additional areas of the criminal justice system that's going to be at play. So I definitely want to make sure that we're adding the attention and the priority to crime victim compensation so that all those different interests can be balanced. Thank you so much. And on the upcoming business for the annual report, I definitely want to echo that the denial rate of over 25%, almost 30%, is completely unacceptable. That means you're denying even more victims now, even though you're spending millions of dollars on marketing and advertising and consulting outreach, on the basis of trying to get more awareness for the program. But whenever you get more awareness for the program, you end up denying more victims. So I really want to stress that that is very unacceptable. That number should be going down. And on the topic of general business, so I hope this is going to be my last topic. For the Cal VCB online application and their technology system in general, I want to give everyone a little recap. Recently, back in March 2017, Cal VCB updated the CARES system from version 1 to version 2. And that was kind of prompted by a 2008 audit by the Secretary of State. So you can imagine from 2008 to 2017, all those kind of yearly reviews and yearly reports that were being provided, everything leading up to a need to update the systems. Sometime in late 2018, Cal VCB launched the expenses and billing portal for providers. Sometime in early 2019, they launched the online application portal that we have today for crime victims. And in August 2020, the online application portal for victim center advocates was made available. So everything that goes through these publicly facing portals goes into that updated CARES 2 system. Sometime in May 2021, Cal VCB worked with the contractor and a vendor to launch an update to the public facing website. So not the application portals. So the public facing website of the agency doesn't touch CARES at all. So my comments on this is, what is being done to continue to audit the technology systems, to continue to make sure that these online applications have all the information that crime victims and advocates and providers need to be able to support victims getting their claims approved. So now, you are already coming up to year 2025, year 2026. So there really needs to be some sort of additional updates to be made to these platforms. Because I can definitely say from my own testimonial, and now moving on to a comment for my own claim, back in July 17, my claim was partially approved and partially denied for a hearing held on March 20 for this year. And I did file a reconsideration on August 20. That was timely. And one of the grounds that I want to point up particularly for this comment is I noticed that Section 8 on the online application is not available for applicants. That's the employer section, employer information section. On Section 10 for the paper application, that section is available. So there's a discrepancy between what you're providing on paper applications to applicants and what you're providing on the online application. And I will tell you the really big issue now is that in my case, one of the very first comments that the hearing officer put in the proposed decision before even going into any other parts, literally page 2, they say that I did not provide any employer application information for my application, and that is completely false, and that is completely not true. That is completely as a result of Cal VCB's own technical malfunctions related to their online application portal. My online application was submitted in the very end of 2023. And even now, when I open up the online application to do like a fake application, I don't submit it, but I just open it to see what it looks like today. Section 8 is still unavailable. So what is the problem here? CalVCB is aware that they have a malfunction. They're not fixing it. And what's the worst thing that they're doing? They're making false accusations against victims who actually have eligible claims, all in order to try to undermine their credibility, which to me it's a complete abuse of power. It's not allowed in the law. Those are not grounds to deny applications when it's your own technical malfunction and not the fault of the crime victim. So please, for your upcoming November meeting, please create an agenda item to do some sort of review or audit of your online application portal. I know you've had a lot of turnover in your staff, in your IT department. I know you have a CIO. And considering myself, I work in the cybersecurity industry. So this was a very glaring thing to pop out at me. And I'm already very concerned about what other vulnerabilities are present in your systems that are being used against victims. So thank you so much for taking the time to hear me out today. I really hope all of the areas that I brought up today are going to be given the attention that they deserve. And lastly, I also echo the sympathies for all victims of political violence. Political violence is completely unacceptable, and we all have to do a better job of being there for one another. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Tenoyan. Yes, we definitely want to follow up on the issues with the portal that you've raised to make sure that that's not an experience that our applicants are having, that they're not able to submit documents. So thank you for raising that. Looks like we're done with public comment on items not on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. We will move to item 3, which is the Executive Officer Statement, and it will be presented by Executive Officer Linda Gledhill.
Good morning, board members. I want to update the board on a couple of items that we've talked about previously. First, our federal voter grant. In late July, the federal government posted the notice of funds available for the Federal Victims of Crime Act compensation grant. The grant requirements included broad language regarding states supporting and assisting federal immigration enforcement activities. And so consequently, on August 18th, California Attorney General Rob Bonta joined a coalition of 15 other states in filing a lawsuit challenging these new requirements. The basis for this challenge included that these grants are unrelated to federal civil immigration and enforcement and are used by states to provide critical resources to victims and survivors of crime. CalVCB, with this lawsuit pending, did apply for a federal grant. And in fact, just last night, we were awarded our grant. However, we continue to work very closely with the Attorney General's office on next steps to make sure that we are protecting both our ability to use this federal money and also the people that we serve. I'd like to let you all know that we are CalVCB has begun the process of streaming our mental health guidelines in a way that will result in only service rates and limitations existing outside of the statutes and regulations. You may recall historically our mental health claims have been governed by a separate document with content approved by this board based on the statutory authority that allowed CalVCB to set rates and service limitations without the necessity of going through the formal rulemaking process. For the purposes of clarity and to strengthen any questions of interpretation of statutory authority, we've decided to move away from the standalone document and establish regulations to support mental health claims processing. Teams are currently reviewing the existing guidelines and preparing a regulation package that will come to this board. As we proceed with this process, we have suspended what is known as the 90-day rule policy, which requires mental health providers to submit bills within 90 days of each date of service provided. Despite the board approving this policy and it being implemented, we've had many conversations with providers, stakeholders, and feedback from staff that there have been challenges, including an increase in the number of appeals related to this very specific rule. We believe that streamlining of this effort will help resolve those challenges. I'd also, like to talk to the board about the Trauma Recovery Center process, as we appreciate everyone's insights and information shared during the informational meeting in July. The meeting highlighted the challenges regarding two distinct issues. One is, of course, the lack of stable funding and declining funding for the Trauma Recovery Center program. The other is the ways that the administration of the grant could be changed if there was sufficient funding. So we have considered this feedback and are interested in pursuing a handful of minor changes for this current grant year that will allow us, that we can do given the lack of funding that we have, that we anticipate. We also are certainly interested in continuing to have discussions about the administration of a program as a whole if there becomes more sufficient funding. So in the short term, for the next Notice of Funds Available, or NOFA, we plan to move the timeframe to start in mid-October and end in mid-December, thus avoiding having the work being done over the holiday season when some places are closed. We heard that that was an issue. We're going to extend the amount of time from 60 days to 45 days that TRCs may submit applications. We recognize the risk that might mean that there will be more applications when we have significantly fewer funds. We also plan to improve clarity in two areas. How organizations can receive the highest number of points for each component of the application, and that the application scoring team can only consider information submitted on the application when determining scores. These are both issues that we have heard from trauma recovery centers that have applied for the program, and so we're going to try to clarify that even further. We believe that the other suggestions made by stakeholders during the meeting are policy decisions that would best be done when there is stable funding available. We do not believe that these ideas can be effectively implemented given the current uncertainty and the funding projection of perhaps having as little as $5 million to distribute in 2026. Ultimately, if stable funding were available, then I think we could have that discussion and get board's direction on different ways to approach for some of the goals that were expressed during that hearing. And so I think that I would like to say that I think we should continue to have that conversation, and certainly open to comments from the board, but would like to proceed with the changes to the NOFA as we've expressed them today for this upcoming grant cycle, and continue to have that conversation depending on how the funding conversation goes with the legislature and the governor's office. A couple weeks ago, I was able to go to the 14th Annual Sexual Assault Response Team Summit in San Diego. I was on a panel with other members of the First Partners Working Group to support survivors of sexual assault. I also gave an individual presentation on CalVCB and the services that we provide. Was able to have a lot of really good conversations with people in the room who do some of the hardest work that there is, which is to be able to help survivors of sexual assault when they come to the emergency room. So it was a very rewarding attendance. Finally, I'd like to talk about the annual report. As you saw in your binder, we believe this highlights CalVCB's commitment to putting victims first. Our entire organization worked to promote access and equity in the CalVCB services. For example, expanding the advocate portal, we worked with our partners through a series of discussions, videos, and webinars to improve the portal's capability and expand access to community partners. I'm really proud of the work that we have done to improve access, expand outreach, and raise awareness. And we, continue to be committed to identifying efficiencies and supporting our team as they go through professional development so that they're well equipped to help victims of crime. A couple of the public comments I should note. Of course, all state government salaries are public and available to anyone who would like to find them. Most of our IT contracts, large contracts, of course, come to the board for approval. And we have, I understand that the approval rate of applications, I think obviously our goal is to help as many victims as possible. And we do that, and we have a team that is 100% committed to that goal. When you do things like we've been doing with the outreach that we have been undertaking over the last couple of years, you tend to see more applications. for people who perhaps don't quite understand what the program is for. And that naturally leads to an increase in the denial rate. We saw this again when we've talked to the board about the advertising that we're doing right around when the LA fires hit, using the words victims, using rebuilding, and that on its own will create a number of applications that are simply not relevant to the work that we do. And so those do have the effect of increasing a denial rate. And so there are many reasons for all of these items, and of course, happy to answer any questions. I do just want to note that for the advocate portal, that is open to district attorney's offices and the victim services centers. It is not open to law enforcement because certainly we understand that there may be a concern in the community about law enforcement access to victim data, and that is not something, there's no connection there, and I want to make sure that that information is very clear. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Executive Officer Gledhill. Are there any questions or comments from board members?
Chair, if I may. Executive Director Gledhill, I really appreciate, there you go. I really appreciate the work that went into this. I want to touch first on the annual report. Appreciate the work that went into this annual report. I know in the past we've talked about bringing increased data and transparency to this process, and I feel like this was very responsive to that. You know, and it reflects the good work that you and your team have done over the past year. Increased outreach, increased media campaigns, metrics associated with that, alternative languages, accessibility being, you know, and all the things that come along with that have really been a focus of yours, and really appreciate that. And I also appreciate the streamlining of the appeals process, and you know, the sort of effort to manage the additional workload that's coming, you know, that is coming your way as a result of the amended appeals process. I did have a couple questions. One on that particular question is, you know, how's it going related to appeals and potential building backlog, and you know, how are you handling the workload, I guess is the question. How's it going?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that I will say that our backload remains steady, which means it hasn't significantly increased. Unfortunately, that also means it has not significantly decreased. We did receive in the budget this year, positions to be able to hire both staff and attorneys to help handle that appeals backlog. As you well know, the state hiring process can be cumbersome, but we have worked extremely diligently, including our chief counsel, to try to fill those positions. I will say that we have done a lot of interviews. We have managed to hire a handful of people, but it is an ongoing process. It is not it's not simple. So as we have more people joining the team, in fact, I think we have 2 more joining us on this upcoming Monday. So those people will be starting and getting onboarded and beginning to learn our process and how to do that work. We hope that that will have a more significant impact on the appeals numbers. We are also examining our processes every day to see if there are other things we can do to help manage that backlog in a different way. So it is an ongoing process. It is one that is a top of mind for myself and the whole team as we continue to make sure that we're able to hire and process applications as quickly as possible.
Great. I appreciate that. And yeah, I appreciate the situation you're in and the advocacy you've done to get additional resources as well. What's the timeline like, for the average timeline for an appeal at this point, if you don't mind me asking?
Asked our chief counsel.
18 to 24 months from the time that the appeal is filed. I will say that we've undertaken many efforts to streamline the work as much as we can. We've done focused reviews for the attorneys and both for the appeals analyst, which means we've gone through their queues to see what things could be worked quickly and moved on. And also, for instance, if there are a bunch of cases in the relocation bucket, then maybe that week you work on relocation because it's much easier if you stick with one subject. So we've done focused reviews for the attorneys, the the analyst. We've also changed the process for identifying failure to appear and failure to respond so that we can move those off of our books as quickly as possible. And we are even pursuing technological updates that would help identify the work and help us organize it easier.
Right. I do appreciate those efforts and the like I said, the challenge you're facing. I understand. I also, another thing that stood out to me was something that a couple of the advocates had mentioned in their comments, which was that significant increase in the denial rate. And, at least as far as I saw, it was 15.3% in 2022-23 and 28.9% in 24-25, which is a significant increase. I just wanted to see if there was a better understanding of why that is. And I think you've explained some of that, right? Which is with increased outreach, you get increased sort of misapplication, right? People who don't quite understand what the program's for, et cetera. Is that sort of the nut of it, or is there additional explanation behind that?
So there was also a comment made about applications being referred to an outside law enforcement agency. There were a significant number of applications where we needed to do that that were all denied. And it's an ongoing investigation, so apologies for not perhaps going into a lot of detail. But it had an impact on our denial rate. And so there's a footnote on that denial rate, on some of those numbers because of that. And again, because it's an ongoing investigation, it's not something that we can really talk about publicly. But it definitely did, in addition to some of those other factors, it also had an impact on our numbers.
Great. I appreciate your explanation on that. Thank you. And then I did just want to turn quickly to the TRCs, if that's okay. And I really appreciated the hearing that we had back in July. It was really great. I appreciate Janelle, who's on the call here, and all the other advocates that showed up and shared their voices. That was really helpful to me as a board member, just to understand the process, how Cal VCB's grant-making process impacts them, the work that they do, and the challenges that they face, the challenges that you face here at Cal VCB. I think it was a really productive discussion, and I appreciate that. There were significant comments made, obviously, around potential policy changes, and I appreciate you flagging the challenge that Cal VCB faces in the funding arena, right? Obviously, that's priority number one. Is if there's not more funding there, then nobody, we fund 2 or 3 and that's it, and it's catastrophic for the TRCs. But I do want to see if there's a commitment on your side to, if there is funding available, to revisit this policy question, and that is. The administration has shown in the past that they are willing to support this program, and they've done so from the general fund in the past. So it's not out of the question to think of, say, an early action budget item that happens next year and gloriously restores the funding or supplements the funding to put us back at maximum or even higher, right? It's not outside of the question. And I guess in that instance, would we then reopen? Would we reopen the NOFA and accept more applications? Would we revisit it? Would we at that point have that policy question? I guess the question is, how do we prepare for a situation, although potentially unlikely, a situation where we do have funding for this program?
Yeah, that's a lot of maybes, and so I'm hesitant to. What I will say is this: is we are committed to have an open conversation with the board about this as we move forward. I think a lot of it depends on timing. As you know, the TRCs start July 1. Administratively, we really need to have those ready 6 to 8 weeks before that, so that the contracts can be signed. And so that's why we have the March board meeting for approval, with the update on the day of the May revise with whatever the dollars change, in order to be able to move that information, because even that is an extremely quick timeline in the world of state contracting to be able to get those contracts done and in place before July 1. So within that time frame, if there is an influx of money for the current year, I mean, I think that will be the question. Will it be for, it would have to be current year money, not budget year money. For, if there was that influx, would we want to have a conversation about what that looks like for the program? I'm absolutely happy to have that, and we'll commit that we will do that. But given uncertainty about the timing and what impact that would have on how we would proceed, I'm not sure I want to commit to anything beyond being more than happy to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think I just want to highlight that, we had that hearing in July. We're here again in September. The NOFA is going to go out, what, in a couple weeks? Is that right? Or
Mid-October.
okay, so a month or so. So we had that time for a couple months where we could have had policy amendments. We didn't have them, which is fine. I know there are technical amendments that we're undertaking now. But we're sort of postponing this policy conversation. At least what I'm hearing is we're postponing this policy conversation until there's certainty around money. If there was certainty around money, how quickly could we have that conversation? And are we talking about this year and next year is kind of what's at the nut of it. I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait until we have money in hand to then have to scramble to fix the program if we feel like there are deficiencies. And I just want to make sure these things are both moving, right? I understand the challenge we're in for the immediate, but that shouldn't prevent us from thinking about addressing the broader policy questions that were raised at that hearing.
I hear what you're saying, and I agree. The board, if the board wants to at some point provide a more concrete path that it would like us to pursue, that's obviously something that we're, would be happy to do.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Johnson, Member Becton, do you have any comments on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So just a couple of things. I guess I'll start with the TRC since we're on that subject. I really had a great appreciation for the hearing. It was, since I've been on the board, it's the first time that we've had an opportunity to hear directly from those who are most affected by some of the policies. I think it was well organized. It was great to be able to have the historical perspective, but then also get the specific information about the funding structure and certainly the dire outlook, if you will, about the funding. And so all of that was very helpful, as well as getting more information and transparency about the administrative process and the considerations that go into play. So I think all of that was very helpful. I'm greatly also appreciative of all of those who participated, especially all of the TRCs who provided input to us. And I think we really did receive some information that gives us significant food for thought. And I do understand completely that with the funding resources that we have available and the timeline that we have to be able to get the ball moving for this particular cycle, that we may not have any major changes to consider. But I echo my fellow board members' comments about making sure that some of these things that were discussed over and over by a number of the TRCs, that we do find a time to take them up and really have some recommendations. There were some things that were mentioned that I think it would be good to at least have a discussion about. One was even getting a definition of what an existing TRC is, so that we could then begin to explore those questions about whether the existing TRCs could get extra points, or if they could get some special consideration in the process. And I think that if we start out with that definition, that would be helpful. Also, some of the comments that don't necessarily require a lot of money, like making sure that we're offering significant technical assistance to the TRCs during the grant process. I have a lot of appreciation for some of the things that you've mentioned that are being changed, like the amount of time that the TRCs have to apply, but also just moving away from the holiday period, I think, was something that maybe we hadn't even thought about, but what a good idea. And I'm glad that you've taken that into account. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose an opportunity to explore some of the things that were given to us to consider, even though we may not be able to act on them for this budget cycle. But going forward, there were some significant points that were made that I would love to see us explore, especially around the things to consider about the existing TRCs and how we can have that process work better for supporting them once we have had those startups. As far as the public comment today on the report, I think the report gives us a lot of information. I think the staff has done a good job of increasing transparency about what is being reported. And so I'm greatly appreciative of all of the efforts. The graphics are good and the percentages are good to give us a snapshot about, who is being served and where that money is going. One of the concerns that was raised around the public comment was just around the ratio of funding that actually goes to victims versus administrative costs. And I think without having to concentrate on individual positions or salaries, that is a category that might be considered in the next report. Just a percentage of the budget, how much of that goes to administrative salaries, I think, or just administration in general of the program. I think that is an important factor that the public has expressed an interest in, and I think would be helpful in evaluating the work that is being done by this organization. Also, we had a question about the declinations. We have the percentage of applicants by race, but the request was to consider declinations by race, and I think that could be important, especially around evaluating whether there are huge disparities in those who are not receiving funding and the reasons that exist for that particular group of individuals not to receive funding, so that we could be able to determine whether there's additional resources that should be concentrated on that particular group so that we could lessen some of those disparities. So those would be my comments. But thank you for all of the work that went into the report. Gave us a lot of information. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Becton.
Thank you. Item 4 is the legislative update, which will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Katie Gardinas.
Good morning. As the legislature concluded its session for the year last week, I would like to highlight the status of a few key bills. AB 379 by Assemblymember Schultz requires CalVCB to award grants to community-based organizations that provide direct services in areas with a high concentration of sex trafficking. The governor signed that bill on July 30th. AB 938 by Assemblymember Bonta would have allowed an individual who committed a violent crime while a victim of human trafficking, intimate partner violence, or sexual violence to apply to have their sentence vacated. The bill was held on the suspense file in the Senate Appropriations Committee and did not move forward. AB 1213 by Assemblymember Stefani would provide that a victim restitution order shall have priority over any other debts, liens, or monetary judgments. The bill has been sent to the governor and he has until October 12th to sign or veto bills. And then finally, SB 470 by Senator Laird would extend current provisions governing the use of teleconferencing in public meetings by a state body until January 1st of 2030, and that bill has also been sent to the governor. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Cardenas. Shows the increased and continued interest in our work here. Any questions or comments from board members on the legislative update?
Yes, just one quick question. The AB 379 was passed, but contingent on funding, correct? There was no funding made in the budget bill. Is that correct?
It established a new fund called the Survivor Support Fund, and it established a new fee that can be levied against perpetrators of human trafficking. And so that fund will have to be established after the bill goes into effect at the beginning of the year, and then it is supported by fees.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 is the contract report, which will be presented by Deputy Executive Officer Sean Ramirez.
Good morning, board members. The contract report today informs the board that the translation and interpretive services contract was awarded to Accent on Languages. The board previously approved CalVCV to procure a vendor for these services during the March 20th meeting. This is informational and does not require board action, though I'm available to answer any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Ramirez. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item? Thank you.
The board will now convene into closed session under Government Code Section 11126 sub C3 to discuss numbers 1 through 82 of the Victim Compensation Program.
the elementary and Elk Grove do year round.
Oh, that's right. You're in sort of 1 month off and then
Yeah.
3 months or whatever.
Yeah, we did that for a little while and then we moved and we gave the kids the option of switching schools because their school and they were on a traditional calendar.
Do they have a preference?
They like to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. The board is reconvening into open session under Government Code Section 11126 sub C3. Do I have a motion on items 1 through 82 of the Victim Compensation Program?
I move approval of items 1 through 82 of the Victims' Compensation Board.
I second.
Council, please call the roll.
The motion for consideration is approval of the Victim Compensation Program agenda, items 1 through 82. Member Becton,
Aye.
Member Johnson,
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Council. Is there any other business that needs to come before the board today? Seeing and hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move
Motion.
adjournment.
And I'll second.
Council, please call the roll.
Member Becton,
Aye.
Member Johnson,
Aye.
Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back in November.